Hey everyone, it's your boy Brian Von VA, favorite narrator and voice actor from Ohio. How's everyone doing? Boys and girls, make sure to go get yourself a snacky and something to drink because we've got another doozy. DMs. What is the most beloved NPC you've ever run? What did you do that made your players love them? Part 2. There's a dragon that lives in the Sword Coast named Felgalos. He can play a minor part in Storm King's Thunder if you play by the book, but I decided to make him more part of the story. Felgalos is canonically a clumsy dragon, and I had him also be a hard-partying halfling when polymorphed. Things he has done so far in my campaign. Flew invisibly into a chapel tower, causing a major distraction and helping the PCs save a town, except for the chapel. Helped uncover details about the Black Spider's plot to take over the Phandelver mine. Carried a Dwarven Special Forces attack group onto a flying cloud giant castle. Helped the PCs sneak onto a casino riverboat, whereon he ate a raspberry.
Is this a raspberry? Oh, I'm allergic to raspberries.
He spent the entire swashbuckling combat vomiting lightning bolts off the stern of the boat. Got kidnapped and tortured by a cloud giant, then rescued by the PCs. This was the moment where the final holdouts about him were converted to fans. Helped PCs return to the Cloud Giant Castle and get the MacGuffin. Assisted in the combat against the big bad evil guy of Storm King's Thunder. Got teleported into the Underdark, then was cursed to lose his ability to polymorph. Joined a cult that was accidentally started by the PCs while time traveling, used one of the PC's 2 remaining wishes to restore his polymorph. I feel like there's a couple more too. The campaign isn't over yet, so I'm still figuring out how to integrate him into the story. At this point, the PCs are tougher than the dragon, so that's an interesting change. One I made that stood out. Traveling to a bigger city than wherever campaign began has a bunch of people outside with events going on and whatnot, and one spot has a bunch of viewers to a sort of large pen. Inside, it's just a giant grease pit with a grease-covered gnome named Greasy, who loves to smack-talk participants in the event. People pay a small fee to try to catch Greasy in the game, catching Greasy. He is slippery as hell and dexterous, plus he cheats. And he loves it. His hair is slicked back, greasy as hell, and he'll kick around grease as he high steps out of grappling attempts. It requires some backstory, but there'll be a TLDR at the end, but it won't capture the essence. In my homebrew world, there were no true dragons. There were creatures that resembled dragons, called dragons by the public in everyday speech, but even the very oldest only lived a few hundred years, only reached the size of a large house, and were about as bright as a human 5-year-old. Of course, my players wanted to ride them. They ventured into the snow-covered mountains and tried capturing some white dragons, but ended up with only eggs to show for it. No worries, they would raise them from hatchlings instead. But on the way down the mountain, they realized that the eggs were deteriorating when the temperature rose, so they needed some way to keep them below freezing. We have a barrel. We have water. If we only had some way of keeping the temperature down. Everyone eyes the evil frost artifact sword they've been trying to figure out a way to destroy. All the eggs died except one. The players did not know this at the time, but they had just created the first true dragon in my world, as the energies from the sword interacted with the long-dead bloodline of true dragons. See, true dragons had existed many thousands of years before, but had devolved into the creatures called dragons today. Long and not relevant story. It took about 2 IRL years before it became apparent to them, as the dragon played the loyal mount for many in-game years while building its own power and growing. The reveal came when the party was about to TPK and the dragon suddenly tripled in size, started flinging spells, and ripped apart their opponent. See, despite being an evil dragon, the players, especially the paladin that was his rider, were his family. They were basically his parents, and while he had kept his true nature from them, he couldn't just let them die, even if it would expose him before he felt ready. The players were flabbergasted, and a lot of things suddenly made sense. That new crime kingpin in the capital they could never find and take out? Kind of hard to ambush him when you're mounted on him, waiting for him to show up. The players never wondered what the dragon mount did when they were not using it. Obviously, the dragon then left the party, but despite it being super problematic, they couldn't get themselves to kill him either, which led to a love-hate relationship for several more IRL years as their former pet shifted between ally, enemy, and something in between, depending on where their interests aligned or opposed. Going on 20 years later, the players still talk about that storyline. The culmination was an apocalyptic end of the campaign battle featuring massive armies, where the dragon arrived with its spawn in a Gandalf-worthy scene of
"At dawn, look to the east,"
in their hour of need, and thus they saved the world by not killing their morally challenged dragon's son. TLDR, players accidentally created a dragon which viewed them as parents and eventually helped them save the world. It was my first campaign, and I had just begun DMing and playing. The party enters a room and sees a hand-sized chest moving. They move to engage, but discover a fairy making a cosplay of a chest. At first they say,
"A mimic would have been cooler."
Her name was Fadin, a typo on small fairy in Portuguese because I was lazy. She was deformed. She could not fly, talk, or cast spells, only healing word. They started loving her quick, and they loved her a lot. They made her a home inside one of their backpacks and helped her make different cosplays like Flower and Pan. The bard met his wife and future mother of his 2 children when she tried to steal the fairy, thinking she was an actual chest. I never stopped to think that they actually liked her. For me, she was just an NPC that was slowing the initiative order. I liked the other NPCs more, and she was my creation, and thinking that someone could possibly like something I created was outlandish for me, so I had the idea to kill her to have less NPCs with the party, since we had the bard's daughter. This was a year and a half later IRL, and 16 years later in-game, and an escort mission. So on the next combat, a Kodal used a breath weapon and she died. I was shocked at the pain in the bard's real-life screams. Someone not informed could have thought someone had actually died there. The others were also more sad than I expected, but they recovered. The bard never did. Our friendship was never the same. We continued to play for a year until I had to stop for a month, and when I came back, we disbanded. Cap'n Crunch. Not a D&D knockoff, the real Cap'n Crunch. I ran a 90s food commercial villains one-shot, started with the Kool-Aid Man and ended with a battle against Count Chocula, Tony the Tiger, and the Trix Rabbit. One character played a moody teen named Debbie, who was basically Judy from Doug, so I gave her a reskinned tarot deck of many things, because why not? It's a one-shot. What could go wrong? She pulled the 4th level fighter card, which I had reskinned as Captain Crunch. And honestly, I have never had more fun playing an NPC in my whole DM career. Just being able to wreak chaotic good havoc in the name of protecting Debbie, including from her annoying younger brother PC who wanted to read her diary and getting to yell, "Your booty is your own, Debbie," was the best. When they used the wish card, yeah, they pulled really well. To set everything right again after the final battle, Debbie kissed him on the cheek, and as he disappeared, he said, "What's a pirate's favorite letter? Some say it's R, others the C, but to me, it's you, Debbie!" We've decided to go back into that world 3 years later, Millennium one-shot, baby, and everyone has decided that if he doesn't come back, they won't play with me again. There are 2 that come to me off the top of my head. First is Smiler the Defiler. From Baldur's Gate, Descent into Avernus. I took a bit from that module for my homebrew campaign and had Smiler on a random encounter table. For those that don't know, Smiler is a fae who was abandoned in Avernus by his friends and has slowly gone insane. They like how I started to play him more and more unhinged as the conversation went on, and appreciated that he is essentially a Borderlands character with how insane he is. Another one that is very recent is Professor Grusmel. He is a male orc who is a scholar and does research into many very specific fields of study, one of which being sentient and animated objects. I introduced him as a character to be rescued by the party as a part of a one-shot. What they did not know until they met him is that he is a barbarian, but instead of getting angry when he rages, he puts on his spectacles and goes into a scholarly rage, which is more a state of intense focus and analyzing the enemy as he hits them with his dwarven thrower. And for the record, his intelligence score is 16, and he has proficiency with about half of the intelligence skills. A rogue sidekick from the starter kit campaign. He started as a prospector that had come to Fandalen to strike it rich, but eventually his character changed into a Hillbilly Pig Wrestler, hated by half the group, loved by the other half. Retired from their group when he fell in love with one of the half-orc Talos worshippers, and they eloped, just like his pappy did. My most beloved NPC was actually a villain, and far from a redeemable one at that. His name was Afat. giant, and he was a large, bald, muscular-looking guy with a prosthetic arm that, despite being made of metal, was very lifelike. The party first encountered him as he went to recover some gems they had taken from various undead. He was rather intimidating, but he was polite and more than happy to just take the gems and not fight the party for anything else. There were a couple more run-ins like this. He was always arriving when the party was in a bad spot and not wanting to fight this scary-looking guy and his expensive, magic-looking prosthetic arm. He'd even answer the occasional question, though he'd be sparse on the details. Later, they find him conducting a raid on a mine for rare metals. One of the PCs had a backstory related to it, but fighting their way through the goons he had and ransacking the place left them hurt once again, and they didn't want to risk the confrontation. He was still polite despite the fact that he was raiding a location very significant to one of the PCs, and this time he had been friends with him as well. Where he becomes a treasured NPC, though, is in the next arc. They're in the same area for unrelated reasons. The PCs are trying to save an NPC they've managed to unbrainwash. A Fat is unaware that she is no longer brainwashed, and he's working on furthering his plans while providing shelter for the formerly brainwashed NPC. The PCs have a side quest they use as a cover story, and a Fat happily helps them with their side quest and invites them to breakfast. This breakfast turned into an hour-long RP scene with a lot of fun reveals. They discover he is in service of the big bad evil guy they only had rumors about. He also chillingly informs the PCs about the plan to turn the country into a fascist undead utopia, with the working class being subjugated as slaves who only live long enough to reproduce before being killed and turned into undead, unless they show talent in intellectual pursuits. He respects the PCs and sees them as belonging in the utopia and insists they'll change their mind when they aren't super excited about it. He also doesn't eat a bite until confronted about it, which adds to the overall mystery behind this guy. They end up breaking their friend out, and he manages to force a confrontation where, thanks to some poor tactical decisions, one of the PCs dies before they manage to escape. Eventually, they find out that he's actually a homunculus built by the big bad evil guy for the purpose of bringing undead fascism into the world. And while he seems to have free will, he's very aware that if he was the sort of person to choose some other life, he would probably be remade. But he's overall satisfied with being a sociopathic fascist. So, yeah, he's unrepentantly about as evil as it gets, but he was polite, mysterious, and friendly, and the PCs were super intrigued by him. And that breakfast scene is held as probably the best encounter I've ever done by the players I'm still with. Hey everyone, Brian Von VA here, checking in after the vid. If you like today's stories, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you can be notified whenever we post or go live. And if you have a story you'd like to share with us, please leave it on our subreddit r/MrRipper. And make sure to follow us on Twitter and Twitch. Links are going to be in the description below. Using a help action, please come say hi to me, Brian Von VA, over on YouTube, where I stream games, post memes, and voice acting videos as well. As always, I try to end my videos in particular on a positive note, and tonight is no different. I would like to tell each and every single one of you that no matter what you have done or not have done in this world, I am proud of you. I'm proud of you for continuing to go forward despite all the hardships, despite all the negativity, and all the fire that this world has to offer. I know it's hard, I know it's a struggle, and I know sometimes you probably feel alone too, but you're never truly alone, and it's gonna get better. Yeah, I know, it's kind of a cliche thing to say, but trust me, it took me 26 years to get off my feet and to actually start doing something with my life. More so, 3 more years after that. So, I was 29 when I finally started to get things going. Things can happen suddenly. Things can happen badly or in a great way. Just keep holding on and never let go of your dreams, okay? And if you don't have a dream yet, hey, it's never too late to start one. Just keep going and keep on fighting. All the love to every single one of you. Please be safe, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.